Story 1. The Endless Mile Marker. Jake Morrison had been driving 18-wheelers for 23 years, hauling everything from produce to construction equipment across the continental United States. He'd driven through blizzards in Montana, sandstorms in Arizona, and fog so thick in Oregon that he could barely see his own hood. Nothing rattled him anymore, or so he thought, until that October night on Interstate 80 through Nebraska. He'd left Omaha just after sunset, hauling a load of farm machinery to Cheyenne. The weather was perfect, clear skies with a full moon casting silver light across the endless plains. His GPS showed a straight shot, 6 hours of mostly empty highway. Jake had driven this route dozens of times, knew every truck stop, every speed trap, every place where the road dipped and rose with the subtle contours of the land. Around midnight, he noticed mile marker 390 illuminated in his headlights. He'd pass through this section, refuel at the truck stop near mile marker 420, then push through to Cheyenne by dawn. He turned up the volume on his classic rock station and settled in, one hand on the wheel, the other reaching for his thermos of coffee. 10 minutes later, his headlights swept across mile marker 390 again. Jake frowned, glancing at his speedometer. He'd been maintaining a steady 65 miles per hour. He checked his odometer, which showed he'd traveled exactly 8 miles since leaving the last town. But there was mile marker 390, identical to the one he'd just passed, same reflective green sign, same positioning on the right shoulder. He grabbed his CB radio. "This is Tombstone Express. Anyone got their ears on?" Static answered him. He tried again. "Any drivers on I-80 eastbound? This is Tombstone Express near mile marker 390, looking for a radio check." Nothing but white noise. Jake told himself it was a mistake. Maybe the state had put up a duplicate marker by accident. It happened sometimes with road crews. He pushed down on the accelerator, bringing his speed up to 70. The highway stretched before him, perfectly straight, flanked by dark fields. His headlights carved a tunnel through the darkness, and in the distance, he could see the rhythmic flash of his running lights reflecting off the mile markers as they approached. 15 minutes passed. Mile marker 390 appeared again. His heart began to pound. This wasn't possible. He'd been driving at 70 miles per hour for 15 minutes. He should be nearly 20 miles down the road. Jake pulled over onto the shoulder, his air brakes hissing as the truck came to a complete stop. He grabbed his phone, no signal. The screen showed one bar, then none, then one again, flickering like a dying heartbeat. He stepped out of the cab, his boots crunching on gravel. The night air was cold, carrying the smell of earth and dried corn stalks. He walked to the mile marker and touched it. Solid metal, cold under his fingers. Real. He looked back at his truck, its running lights glowing amber in the darkness, then ahead down the highway. Empty. Behind him, equally empty. Not a single car. Not a single light on the horizon. Jake climbed back into his cab and pulled up his GPS. The screen showed him exactly where he should be. A blue dot moving along Interstate 80, currently at mile marker 412. But outside his window, the sign clearly read 390. He watched the GPS as he started driving again, watched the blue dot crawl forward along the digital map. After 10 minutes, the GPS showed him at mile marker 422. Outside, his headlights illuminated mile marker 390. The rock station had gone to static. He spun the dial, searching for anything, any signal. For a moment, he caught fragments of a voice, a woman speaking in a language he didn't recognize. Then it dissolved back into white noise. He tried the CB again. "Mayday, this is Tombstone Express on I-80. I need assistance." His own voice echoed back at him through the speaker, delayed by several seconds, distorted and strange. He kept driving, faster now, pushing the truck to 75. His palms were sweating despite the cool air from the vents. Mile marker 390. Always mile marker 390. He started counting, watching his odometer, forcing himself to stay rational. He drove for exactly 30 minutes at 75 miles per hour. He should have covered over 37 miles. Mile marker 390 passed by his window again, and this time he noticed something else. There was a car pulled over on the shoulder ahead, hazard lights blinking. Jake's headlights washed over it as he approached. A silver sedan, maybe 10 years old, driver's door hanging open. He slowed, his truck air brakes releasing a long hiss. The car was empty, keys still dangling from the ignition. The engine was running. Jake stopped his truck but didn't get out. Something felt wrong about that car, wrong about how perfectly positioned it was, how the door stood open at exactly 90 degrees like a stage prop. He reached for his logbook, flipped to a blank page and wrote down the time, 12:47 a.m. He wrote the mile marker 390. Then he drove on. Mile marker 390 appeared 7 minutes later. The silver sedan was there again, in exactly the same position, door open, engine running. But this time there was someone standing beside it. A woman in a dark coat facing away from the road. Jake's breath caught. He slowed, and as his headlights swept across her, she turned. Her face was normal at first glance, but something about her proportions was wrong. Her eyes were too far apart, her mouth too wide. She smiled, and Jake saw that her teeth went back too far, row after row disappearing into the darkness of her throat. She raised one hand and waved, a slow, deliberate gesture. Jake slammed his foot on the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, engine roaring. He didn't look in his mirrors. He kept his eyes locked on the road ahead, hands gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles went white. The speedometer climbed past 80, past 85. Mile marker 390. Mile marker 390. Mile marker 390. The woman was standing in the road now, directly in his path. Jake yanked the wheel to the left, feeling the trailer swing out behind him. He fought to control it, feeling the truck tilt, hearing the cargo shift. He straightened out both lanes to himself, and when he looked back, the road behind him was empty, but she was in his passenger seat. Jake screamed, swerving again. The woman sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, that too wide smile fixed on her face. "You can't leave," she said, and her voice sounded like it was coming from far away, echoing up from the bottom of a well. "You're here now, you're always here. Get out." Jake shouted. He reached for her and his hand passed through her shoulder like she was made of smoke. She didn't move, didn't react, just kept smiling. "Others tried to leave too," she said. "They're still here, driving, always driving. You can see them sometimes if you look carefully." Jake did look then, looked in his side mirror. Behind him, stretching back into the darkness, he saw headlights. Dozens of them, hundreds. Trucks and cars and vans, all following him, all trapped on the same endless stretch of road. Some of the vehicles looked old, chrome bumpers and rounded fenders from decades past. The woman faded away like morning mist, but her voice lingered. Mile marker 390. Forever. Jake drove until dawn, or what he thought was dawn. The sky never quite got light, just shifted from black to a deep gray. Mile marker 390 kept appearing every few minutes now, sometimes on the right, sometimes on the left, sometimes on both sides at once. He stopped trying to understand it. He stopped trying to escape. 3 days later, or maybe 3 hours, or maybe 3 years, a highway patrol car pulled alongside him. The officer gestured for him to pull over. Jake did numbly. The officer approached, and Jake saw that his uniform was wrong, outdated by decades. The man's face was gray, his eyes empty. "License and registration," the officer said in a flat monotone. Jake handed them over. The officer looked at them, looked up at Jake, and smiled that same too wide smile. "Everything seems to be in order. You can go. Drive safely now." Jake drives. He passes mile marker 390 every few minutes. Sometimes he sees the silver sedan. Sometimes he sees the woman. Sometimes he sees other drivers, faces pressed against their windows, mouths open in silent screams. His GPS still shows him making progress, moving forward, but outside his window, it's always the same marker, the same empty stretch of highway. His family reported him missing. The police found his truck 3 weeks later, parked neatly at a rest stop near mile marker 415, engine cold, no sign of Jake Morrison. His logbook was open to the last entry, 12:47 a.m., mile marker 390. But on certain nights, other drivers on Interstate 80 through Nebraska report seeing a Peterbilt with running lights glowing amber driving past mile marker 390, the driver's face pale and hollow, hands locked on the wheel, driving forever through a night that never ends. Story 2. The Mirror Highway. Sarah Chen had driven for Atlas Freight Lines for 17 years, specializing in overnight routes through the Pacific Northwest. She preferred the night shifts, loved the solitude of empty highways, the way her headlights carved through the darkness, the hypnotic white lines rushing past. She delivered everything from electronics to medical supplies, always on time, always professional. She was the driver they called when the cargo was critical and the weather was bad. On a Tuesday night in March, she picked up a load in Portland destined for Seattle, a straight shot up Interstate 5. Simple run, one she'd made hundreds of times. The weather forecast called for light rain, nothing unusual for the region. She left the distribution center at 11 p.m., her truck loaded with pharmaceutical supplies that needed to maintain temperature control. The refrigeration unit hummed steadily behind her cab. The rain started just north of Vancouver, a light drizzle that misted her windshield. Sarah turned on her wipers and adjusted her speed, maintaining a steady 60 in the right lane. The highway was quiet, just a few scattered cars and the occasional truck heading in the opposite direction. Her radio played classic country, and she sang along softly, content. Around midnight, she noticed something odd about the southbound lanes. Every vehicle heading in the opposite direction was the same make and model as the vehicles in her northbound lanes. A red Honda Civic passed in the southbound lane at the exact moment. A red Honda Civic passed her in the left lane. A semi-truck with distinctive blue stripes appeared simultaneously on both sides of the highway median. Sarah blinked, rubbed her eyes. Coincidence. But then a white delivery van appeared, heading south in the opposite lanes, and she saw an identical van overtake her on the left. Same logo on the side, same dent in the rear fender. She picked up her phone to check if she was more tired than she realized, if maybe she needed to pull over for coffee. The screen showed 12:17 a.m. She glanced at her dashboard clock, 12:17 a.m. She looked at the digital clock built into the radio, 12:17 a.m. All three displays flickered in perfect synchronization. The next vehicle that passed going south was a silver pickup truck with a distinctive rack of lights on the roof. Sarah's heart began to race as she watched the northbound lanes. 30 seconds later, an identical pickup, lights and all, appeared ahead of her, entering the highway from an on-ramp. This wasn't coincidence. This was impossible. She grabbed her CB radio. "This is Night Owl Express heading north on I-5. Anyone else seeing weird traffic patterns?" A voice crackled back immediately. "Night Owl Express heading north on I-5. Anyone else seeing weird traffic patterns?" It was her own voice, speaking her exact words with no delay. Sarah's hands tightened on the wheel. She tried again. "This is Night Owl. I need assistance. Something strange is happening." Her own voice responded instantly, perfectly synchronized. "This is Night Owl. I need assistance. Something strange is happening." She was about to try a different radio channel when she saw it ahead in the northbound lanes. A Freightliner truck, same model as hers, same Atlas Freight Lines logo on the side, same refrigeration unit. As it approached, she could see through the windshield. A woman was driving, Asian woman with her hair pulled back, wearing a gray jacket. Sarah was wearing a gray jacket. Her hair was pulled back. The other truck passed her, and for a split second she locked eyes with the driver. It was her own face looking back, eyes wide with the same terror she felt, mouth open in the same unspoken scream. Then the truck was past, disappearing into the darkness behind her. She looked in her side mirror. The truck was there, taillights glowing red, but it wasn't moving away. It was maintaining the same distance, as if connected to her by an invisible tether. Sarah pressed down on the accelerator. Her speedometer climbed to 70. The other truck's taillights stayed exactly the same distance away. She slammed on the brakes. Her truck shuddered, air brakes screaming. She came to a stop on the shoulder. In her mirror, the other truck also stopped, perfectly synchronized. Sarah sat there, engine idling, trying to make sense of what was happening. She looked at the southbound lanes. A truck was stopped on the shoulder, her truck. She could see herself in the driver's seat looking back. Sarah grabbed her phone with shaking hands. She pulled up her wife's number, hit call. It rang once, twice, then connected. "Hello," her wife's sleepy voice answered. "Michelle, something's wrong," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "I'm on I-5 and something impossible is happening. Hello," Michelle's voice repeated, identical inflection, same sleepy tone. "Michelle, can you hear me? Something's wrong, I'm on I-5 and..." "Hello," the call wasn't connecting. Michelle was just repeating the same word, the same greeting, over and over like a broken recording. Sarah hung up, tried again. Same result. Every call went through but never progressed past the initial greeting, just the same word looping endlessly. She put the truck back in gear and started driving. In her mirrors, the other truck began moving at the same instant. In the southbound lanes, another version of her truck accelerated in perfect synchronization. Ahead, she could see vehicles appearing on the highway, and each one had a twin in the opposite lanes, mirror images moving in opposite directions. A horrifying thought occurred to her. Sarah reached over and honked her horn, 3 short blasts. From the truck behind her, 3 horn blasts answered. From the southbound lanes, 3 more. The sound echoed across the highway, multiplying, dozens of horns all responding to her signal. They were all her. Every truck on this highway in both directions was her truck. Every driver was her. She was trapped in some kind of loop, duplicating endlessly, each version experiencing the same horror simultaneously. Sarah began to recognize landmarks, a particular overpass, a distinctive billboard. She'd been on this stretch of highway before, would reach it again in about 15 minutes if she maintained her current speed. She watched the odometer, counted down the miles. When she reached the section where she'd first noticed the mirror trucks, she looked carefully at the vehicles around her. There, a red Honda Civic in the left lane. She held her breath and looked at the southbound traffic. Yes, the same Civic passing at exactly the same moment. The loop was complete. She was driving through the same section of highway over and over, but somehow still moving forward, still making progress. Or was she? She checked her GPS. It showed her position, but when she zoomed out, something was wrong with the map. Interstate 5 appeared as usual, but it curved in impossible ways, doubling back on itself, intersecting with its own path. The entire highway system had become a tangled knot, a loop with no exit. Panic rising in her throat, Sarah looked for an off-ramp. There was one ahead, an exit she knew well that led to a small town with a truck stop. She took it, watching the southbound lanes as she did. Another version of her truck took an exit at the exact same moment, mirroring her action. The off-ramp curved away from the highway, and for a moment, Sarah felt hope. Maybe she could break free, get off this loop. But as her headlights swept across the road ahead, her hope died. The ramp curved back on itself, a perfect circle, and dumped her right back onto Interstate 5 northbound, in exactly the same position she'd been before taking the exit. She tried other exits. Every single one led her in a circle, returning her to the same stretch of highway. She tried turning around, heading south instead of north, but the moment she crossed the median, everything flipped. The northbound lanes became southbound. The southbound became northbound. She was still heading the same direction, just with different labels. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, or maybe years. Time felt strange, elastic. Her dashboard clock had stopped changing, frozen at 12:17 a.m. Her phone showed the same time. The sky outside remained the same shade of dark, neither deepening toward true night nor lightening toward dawn. Sarah tried everything. She drove with her eyes closed, hoping to somehow break the pattern. She stopped and got out, walked along the shoulder, but she could see other versions of herself doing the same thing at equal intervals up and down the highway, like reflections in parallel mirrors stretching to infinity. She screamed, and hundreds of screams echoed back. Eventually, she just drove. What else could she do? She maintained a steady speed, kept her hands on the wheel, watched the endless mirror images of herself driving the same stretch of highway forever. Sometimes she saw versions of herself crying. Sometimes she saw versions that had given up, slumped over the wheel, trucks drifting between lanes. Sometimes she saw versions that were screaming, pounding on the windshield. She wondered how many versions of her existed in this loop. Hundreds, thousands, all experiencing the same nightmare simultaneously, all trapped in the same impossible stretch of road. Were there other drivers here too, loops within loops, each person caught in their own infinite journey? The pharmaceutical supplies in her trailer were supposed to be delivered to a Seattle hospital by 8 a.m. Sarah thought about the patients waiting for those medications, thought about Michelle waking up to find her missing, thought about the life she'd never get back to. All of it felt distant now, like memories from someone else's life. At some point, she noticed that the other versions of herself were changing. Some had aged, hair gone gray, faces deeply lined. Some looked younger, smooth-skinned and wide-eyed with fresh terror. Time was moving differently for each iteration, or maybe she was seeing versions of herself from different points in time, all collapsed together on this impossible highway. She saw a version of herself that was just bones, still gripping the wheel of a truck that had rusted to fragments. She saw a version that wasn't quite human anymore, features distorted, body stretched and wrong. She saw versions that had simply ceased to be, empty cabs driving themselves, ghost trucks following the endless route. Sarah Chen drives still, or one version of her does. The Atlas Freight Line's truck was found abandoned on the shoulder of I-5 near Salem, Oregon, almost exactly halfway between Portland and Seattle. The refrigeration unit had failed, the pharmaceutical cargo spoiled. No trace of Sarah was ever found, despite extensive searches. But drivers on Interstate 5 through Oregon and Washington sometimes report strange occurrences around midnight. They see duplicate vehicles in the opposite lanes, perfect mirror images of the traffic around them. They hear responses on the CB radio that echo their own words with impossible precision. They see trucks with Atlas Freight Line's logos, driven by an Asian woman with terrified eyes, and when they try to help, the truck simply vanishes, blinking out of existence like it was never there. And if you're driving late at night and you happen to check your mirrors at exactly 12:17 a.m., you might see another version of yourself driving the same road, trapped in the same moment, endlessly repeating the same journey through a night that never ends. Story 3. The passenger who wasn't there. Marcus Webb drove for North Star Logistics, hauling loads across the Midwest for nearly 2 decades. He was methodical, cautious, the kind of driver who inspected every inch of his rig before each trip, who kept meticulous maintenance records, who had never had an accident or a serious delay. His spotless safety record was something he took pride in, had earned him bonuses and the company's trust for the most sensitive hauls. In late November, he picked up a load in Chicago headed for Denver. The cargo was valuable, high-end computer servers being relocated for a tech company. The trailer was sealed, climate-controlled, and insured for over $2 million. Marcus signed the paperwork, conducted his pre-trip inspection, and pulled out of the facility just after 9 p.m. The route would take him through Iowa and Nebraska before cutting southwest through Colorado. Total drive time about 16 hours with breaks, putting him in Denver by mid-afternoon the next day. The weather was cold but clear, roads in good condition. An easy run. Marcus settled into his usual routine, cruise control set to 67, classic blues playing low on the stereo. He kept the cab temperature at exactly 68 degrees, like to have it slightly cool to stay alert. His travel mug was full of black coffee, his logbook updated and ready for the way stations he'd passed through. About an hour west of Chicago, still on Interstate 80, Marcus caught movement in his peripheral vision. He glanced at the passenger seat. There was someone sitting there, a man in a dark suit, middle-aged, with thinning hair and wire-rimmed glasses. The man was staring straight ahead through the windshield, hands folded in his lap. Marcus shouted in surprise, yanking the wheel. The truck swerved and he fought to control it, heart hammering in his chest. He looked again at the passenger seat. Empty. Nobody there. Just his jacket draped over the backrest where he'd left it. He pulled over onto the shoulder, hands shaking. He reached over and touched the passenger seat. Just fabric, the residual warmth from the heating vent, nothing else. Marcus sat there for several minutes, breathing deep, trying to calm down. Fatigue, he told himself. Just a trick of the lights and shadows, his mind playing games. He'd only been driving for an hour, but maybe he was more tired than he realized. He got out and walked around the truck, checking the trailer locks, looking for any sign of tampering. Everything was secure. He climbed back in, checked the entire cab, opened the sleeper berth and looked inside. Empty. Of course it was empty. He'd been alone when he left Chicago, and nobody could have gotten in while he was driving 70 miles per hour down the interstate. Marcus pulled back onto the highway, but he couldn't shake the unease. He turned the music up, rolled down the window to let cold air blast his face. The man had seemed so real. Marcus could still picture him perfectly, the cut of his suit, the way his hands were folded, even the brand of his glasses. Half an hour later, Marcus looked in his rearview mirror to check traffic. The man in the suit was sitting in the sleeper berth, visible through the curtain. Marcus screamed and hit the brakes, harder than he should have. The truck shuddered, the trailer fishtailing slightly before he regained control. He yanked aside the curtain. Empty. The sleeper berth was empty. Marcus pulled over again, this time at a truck stop. He went inside, bought more coffee, splashed cold water on his face in the restroom. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked tired but normal, eyes clear, no signs of illness. He slept well the night before, hadn't been drinking or taking any medication. There was no reason for hallucinations. Back in the truck, he called his dispatcher. "Hey, it's Marcus. I'm on the Denver run, wanted to check if there's anything weird about this load I should know about." The dispatcher sounded confused. "Weird how? It's computer equipment, standard shipment. Why is there a problem?" Marcus hesitated. No problem, just checking, all good." He hung up before the dispatcher could ask more questions. He sat in the truck stop parking lot for 20 minutes, watching other trucks come and go, their drivers looking normal and solid and real. Finally, he started the engine and pulled back onto the highway. He had a delivery to make, a schedule to keep. Whatever was happening, he'd deal with it. For the next 2 hours, the man appeared regularly. Sometimes in the passenger seat, sometimes in the mirrors, sometimes standing outside the truck when Marcus glanced at his side cameras. The man never moved, never spoke, just stared with those empty eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Marcus tried to ignore him, told himself it wasn't real, kept driving. Near the Iowa border, Marcus noticed that the man was starting to look different. His suit was deteriorating, threads unraveling, fabric fading. His skin had taken on a grayish cast, and there were dark circles under his eyes. In the glow of the dashboard lights, Marcus could see that the man's hands weren't quite right, fingers too long, joints bending at wrong angles. Marcus turned off the radio. In the silence, he could hear something. Breathing, slow, raspy breathing that wasn't his own. It was coming from right beside him, from the passenger seat where the man sat, even though Marcus could see that the seat was empty. "What do you want?" Marcus said aloud, his voice cracking. The breathing paused, then continued, unchanged. "Why are you here? What do you want from me?" No answer, just that awful rasping breath. At a way station in Iowa, Marcus pulled in for the mandatory check. A state trooper approached and Marcus rolled down his window trying to act normal. "Evening, officer, here for the weight check." The trooper looked past Marcus into the cab and his expression changed. "Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle." Marcus's stomach dropped. "Is something wrong?" The trooper's hand moved to his sidearm. "Step out of the vehicle now, sir. Keep your hands visible." Marcus complied, climbing down slowly, hands raised. 2 more troopers appeared, approaching carefully. "Sir, is there someone else in your truck?" Marcus's mouth went dry. "No, officer, I'm alone. It's just me." The trooper looked skeptical. "I saw someone in your passenger seat. Male, dark suit. Who is he?" Marcus felt cold sweat running down his back. "There's nobody there, officer. You can check. Please check. I'm alone." The troopers searched the entire truck, opened the trailer, examined every inch. They found nothing, no trace of any passenger. Finally, they let Marcus go, but he could see the suspicion in their eyes, could hear them calling in his truck number and license plate as he pulled away. The man in the suit appeared in the passenger seat as soon as Marcus was back on the highway. This time, he turned his head and looked directly at Marcus. His eyes were completely black, no whites, no iris, just solid darkness. His mouth opened and a sound came out, a low grinding noise like metal scraping on concrete. Marcus kept driving because what else could he do? Pulling over wouldn't help. Stopping wouldn't make the man disappear. He was here in the truck whether Marcus wanted him or not. The breathing had gotten louder and now there were other sounds too. Whispers in a language Marcus didn't recognize, scratching noises from inside the walls of the cab. In Nebraska, around 3 in the morning, the man spoke. His voice was dry, rustling like dead leaves. "You're carrying me," he said. Marcus gripped the wheel tighter. "I don't understand. Who are you?" The man smiled, showing teeth that were too white, too perfect. "You're carrying me to Denver. I need to get to Denver. You'll take me there." "The cargo," Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. "It's not computer servers, is it? What's really in the trailer?" The man's smile widened. "Open it and see." Marcus shook his head violently. "No, no way. The trailer stays sealed until Denver." The man leaned closer and Marcus could smell him now, a scent like old earth and decay. "Open it." Against his better judgment, Marcus pulled over at the next exit. It was a rural area, no lights except his truck's running lights, fields of dead corn stretching into darkness on both sides. He grabbed a flashlight and walked back to the trailer, the man in the suit following, staying just at the edge of the light. The seal was intact, but Marcus broke it, his hands shaking. He opened the trailer doors and his flashlight beam swept across the interior. The computer servers were there, stacked on pallets, professionally secured. Everything looked normal. He was about to close the doors when he noticed something. One of the crates had a gap in its side, a narrow opening between slats. Marcus moved closer, shining his light into the gap. Inside, instead of electronics, he saw something else. Pale fabric, dark buttons, the sleeve of a suit. He jerked back, nearly dropping the flashlight. The man in the suit was standing right behind him now, so close Marcus could feel cold radiating from his body. "I died in Chicago," the man said conversationally. 3 weeks ago. Murdered. They put my body in that crate, disguised it as part of the shipment. They're moving me to Denver to dispose of me where nobody will find the evidence. But I can't rest. Not while I'm being moved against my will. Not while my body is being hidden. Marcus backed away, stumbling over his own feet. "This isn't real. You're not real." The man followed, his movements wrong, too smooth, like he was gliding rather than walking. "I'm very real, and you're carrying me, Marcus Webb. You're part of this now, complicit unless you help me." "Help you how?" Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. The man pointed back toward the highway. "Drive to Denver, make the delivery. But when they open the trailer, when they find me, tell them the truth. Tell them what you saw. Don't let them hide what happened." Marcus climbed back into his truck, slammed the door, locked it. The man in the suit was already in the passenger seat, waiting. "I'll drive to Denver," Marcus said, starting the engine with shaking hands. "But then I'm going straight to the police. I'm telling them everything." The man nodded slowly. "That's all I ask." The rest of the drive was a nightmare. The man remained in the passenger seat, sometimes solid enough that Marcus could see every detail, sometimes transparent like smoke. The breathing grew louder, and Marcus could hear other sounds from the trailer now, thumping and scraping, as if something was moving around back there despite the cargo being secured. Denver appeared on the horizon as dawn broke, the mountains dark silhouettes against the lightning sky. Marcus had never been so relieved to see a city. He followed his GPS to the delivery address, a warehouse in an industrial area. As he backed up to the loading dock, the man in the suit spoke one last time. "Remember your promise, Marcus. Tell them the truth." The warehouse workers opened the trailer. Marcus stood nearby, watching. They unloaded crate after crate of computer servers, checking item numbers against their manifest. Everything seemed normal. Then they reached the crate with the gap in its side. The supervisor pried it open. Computer components, just computer components, circuit boards and processors and cables. The supervisor looked at Marcus. "Something wrong, driver, you look pale." Marcus stared at the crate. I thought I saw something when I checked the load, I thought." The supervisor frowned. "You thought what?" Marcus looked around the warehouse. The man in the suit was gone, vanished, like he'd never been there. Marcus Webb never took another long haul after that delivery. He transferred to local routes, day shift only, never more than 50 miles from his home terminal. He told the company he wanted to spend more time with family, but the truth was he couldn't handle the solitude of the road anymore, couldn't handle the darkness and the empty miles where anything might appear in his passenger seat. He never told anyone about the man in the suit. When the story came out 3 months later, when a body was discovered in a Denver landfill and traced back to a murder in Chicago, when police arrested executives from the tech company for embezzlement and murder, when they discovered the victim had been transported in a shipment of computer equipment, Marcus said nothing. He checked the dates. The body found in Denver had been moved in a different shipment, different driver, different route. But Marcus still sees the man sometimes, late at night when he can't sleep, standing at the foot of his bed watching him with those black eyes, wearing that deteriorating suit. The breathing is there too, soft and raspy in the darkness. The man never speaks anymore, just watches, waiting. Marcus doesn't know what he's waiting for, but he knows that someday the man will want another ride, and when that day comes, Marcus will have no choice but to drive. Story 4. The Town Hatmoved. Robert Kincaid had driven delivery routes through rural Montana for 15 years, working for Mountain States Express. His territory covered hundreds of miles of mostly empty country, small towns separated by vast stretches of prairie and mountain passes. He knew every road, every shortcut, every place where cell service dropped out, and you were on your own with just the radio and your thoughts. On a Thursday afternoon in August, Robert was making his regular circuit through the northeastern part of the state. He had deliveries in 5 towns, ending in a place called Meridian, population 347 according to the last census. He'd been delivering there for years, knew the route by heart. State Highway 24 north for 30 miles, then east on County Road 17 for another 40. Meridian sat at the intersection of 2 county roads, a cluster of houses and shops around a grain elevator that served the surrounding farms. Robert left the 4th town, a place called Carson's Bluff, just after 2 p.m. The sky was clear, temperature in the high 70s, perfect driving weather. He had 3 pallets of general merchandise for Meridian's general store, bulk goods and supplies that kept the remote town stocked. The delivery was expected by 5, giving him plenty of time. He turned onto County Road 17 exactly where he always did, at the intersection marked by a faded blue sign. The road stretched ahead, a ribbon of weathered asphalt cutting through golden wheat fields and rolling hills. Robert settled back, one hand on the wheel, watching the familiar landscape pass by. 20 minutes later, he frowned. He should be seeing Meridian's grain elevator by now, a tall structure visible for miles across the flat terrain. But the horizon was empty, just endless fields and distant hills. He checked his odometer. He'd driven 32 miles on County Road 17, 8 miles past where Meridian should be. Robert slowed, looking for landmarks. There should be a distinctive red barn on the left side of the road about a mile before town, a weathered structure that had been there for decades. He hadn't seen it. He hadn't seen any buildings at all since turning onto this road. He pulled over and grabbed his road atlas, the physical paper maps he still carried as backup for when GPS failed. He traced the route with his finger. Highway 24 north, County Road 17 east, Meridian right there at the intersection with County Road 8. 40 miles from Carson's Bluff. He'd just driven over 50. His GPS showed his position as a blue dot on a gray background. No roads displayed, no towns, just his truck sitting in what the GPS believed was empty space. He tried his phone. No signal, which wasn't unusual out here, but usually he could at least see the cell towers, tall structures on the highest hills. Today, the horizon was empty. Robert turned the truck around and headed back the way he'd come. Maybe he'd missed the turn, taken the wrong county road by mistake. It happened sometimes. These rural routes all looked similar. But he'd been so certain, had made this drive dozens of times. He drove back 30 miles, watching for the intersection with Highway 24. It didn't appear. The road just kept going, straight as an arrow through empty fields. No turn-offs, no side roads, no intersections at all. Just County Road 17 stretching endlessly in both directions. Panic began to creep into Robert's chest. He accelerated, pushing the delivery truck to 60, then 70. The fields blurred past his windows. Surely he'd reach something soon, a town, a farmhouse, a crossroad. But the landscape remained unchanging, wheat fields and distant hills under a clear blue sky. After an hour of driving, Robert's fuel gauge showed he'd burned through a quarter tank. He should have covered nearly 100 miles, should have passed multiple towns and intersections. Instead, he'd seen nothing but empty road. He grabbed his CB radio. "This is Mountain Express calling any station, do you copy?" Static answered him, thick and buzzing. "This is Mountain Express on County Road 17. I need assistance. Does anyone copy?" The static changed pitch, almost like it was responding, but no intelligible words came through. He tried the AM radio, spinning the dial through all the frequencies. Nothing but static on every station. FM was the same, just white noise across the entire spectrum. It was as if every radio transmitter in the world had simultaneously gone silent. Robert drove until his fuel gauge read half empty, then reluctantly turned around again. He had to conserve fuel, had to assume he might need to travel hundreds of miles to find help. The sun was lower now, afternoon shadows stretching across the fields. He still hadn't seen a single building, car, or person. As twilight approached, Robert noticed something that made his blood run cold. The fields on either side of the road had changed. They were no longer wheat. They were corn now, tall green stalks that hadn't been there before. He was certain of it. He'd been watching those wheat fields for hours, and now they were corn. He slowed down, staring at the unfamiliar crop. How was this possible? Then he saw the barn. The red barn that should have been a mile outside Meridian, the landmark he'd been looking for. It sat exactly where it was supposed to be, on the left side of the road, weathered wood and a sagging roof. Relief flooded through Robert. He wasn't lost after all. Meridian must be just ahead. He accelerated, eager to reach the town to see familiar buildings and people. The grain elevator appeared on the horizon, and Robert felt tension drain from his shoulders. There it was, exactly where it should be. He'd somehow gotten confused, maybe driven past it before without noticing, his mind playing tricks. Everything was fine. Robert drove into Meridian as the sun touched the horizon, casting long shadows through the town's single street. And immediately knew something was wrong. The buildings were the same, the layout was the same, but everything looked different, older. The general store's paint was faded and peeling, windows dark. The gas station was closed, pumps rusted. The houses looked abandoned, yards overgrown. He pulled up in front of the general store where he always made his delivery. The place looked like it had been closed for years. He got out of the truck, boots crunching on pavement, cracked and buckled with weeds. "Hello." He called out. His voice echoed strangely in the empty street. "Anyone here? I have a delivery for the general store." Nothing. No response, no movement, no sound except wind rustling through the overgrown grass. Robert walked up to the store and tried the door, locked. He peered through the dirty windows. The interior was empty, shelves bare, a thick layer of dust covering everything. He walked down the street, checking other buildings. The post office empty. The diner empty. The grain elevator's office locked and dark. Every building showed signs of long abandonment. This wasn't recent. This place had been empty for years, maybe decades, but that was impossible. Robert had delivered here just 2 weeks ago. He talked to Margaret, who ran the general store, had coffee at the diner, filled up his tank at the gas station. The town had been alive and functioning. How could it look like this now? He walked back to his truck, mind reeling. In the fading light, he noticed something else. There were other vehicles on the street parked in front of various buildings. An old pickup truck with flat tires, a sedan covered in dust, and there in front of what used to be the diner, a delivery truck. Robert approached it slowly, a sense of dread building in his chest. It was a Mountain States Express truck, same as his. Same model, same company logo, but this truck was old, paint faded, tires rotted away. Robert climbed up to look in the cab. The interior was thick with dust and cobwebs. A logbook lay open on the seat, its pages yellowed with age. Robert carefully picked it up, angling it to catch the last rays of sunlight. The last entry was dated August 15, 1987. Delivered 3 pallets to Meridian General Store. Town seems quiet today, hardly saw anyone. Strange atmosphere, starting return trip to Carson's Bluff. 38 years ago. Robert looked at the driver's name written at the top of the logbook. Thomas Hewitt. He didn't recognize the name, but Mountain States Express had been operating for over 50 years. Hewitt must have driven for them back in the 80s. Robert looked at the other vehicles scattered through the town. How many other people had come here and never left? How many had driven into Meridian and found themselves trapped in whatever this place had become? Darkness fell quickly and Robert retreated to his truck, locking the doors. He tried his phone again, still no signal. His GPS still showed him as a blue dot in empty gray space. He turned on his headlights and in their glow he saw movement. People were emerging from the buildings. Shadowy figures walking slowly down the street, gathering in the pools of light from his headlights. They looked normal at first, dressed in clothing from various eras, faces pale in the artificial light. But as they got closer, Robert saw that something was wrong with them. They moved stiffly, joints bending at wrong angles. Their faces were expressionless, eyes reflecting the headlight beams like animals' eyes in the dark. A woman approached his driver's side window. She wore a dress from the 1950s, her hair done in victory rolls. She raised one hand and tapped on the glass with 2 long fingers. "Do you have the delivery?" she asked, her voice muffled but audible. "We've been waiting for the delivery." Robert shook his head, backing away from the window. More figures surrounded the truck, dozens of them, all tapping on the windows and doors. "We've been waiting so long," they said in unison, voices overlapping. "Please make the delivery. Please let us have what we're waiting for." Robert started the engine and hit the gas. The figures scattered as the truck lurched forward. He drove through the town, past the abandoned buildings, following the road that led out. Behind him, the figures stood in the street, watching him go. County Road 17 stretched ahead in his headlights. Robert drove fast, desperate to put distance between himself and that nightmare town. But after an hour of driving, the grain elevator appeared on the horizon again. He was back. Despite driving away, despite following the road in the opposite direction, he'd returned to Meridian. The figures were waiting for him, standing in a line across the road. Robert slammed on the brakes. He couldn't go forward through them, couldn't bear the thought of what might happen if he tried. He turned the truck around and drove the other direction. An hour later, he was back again. Meridian wouldn't let him leave. The town had him now, just like it had Thomas Hewitt in 1987, just like all the other drivers and travelers whose vehicles sat abandoned on its streets. The road led nowhere except back here, looping endlessly, a trap with no escape. Robert drives still, or his truck does. Anyone traveling through rural Montana on County Road 17 might see it sometimes. A Mountain States Express delivery truck appearing suddenly in their headlights, driving too fast, the driver's face pale and desperate behind the windshield. It passes in a moment, then vanishes, blinking out of existence. And if you're very unlucky, if you're driving at just the wrong time on just the wrong stretch of road, you might see a grain elevator on the horizon where no grain elevator should be. You might find yourself driving into a town called Meridian, population 347 according to the old census, where shadowy figures wait patiently for deliveries that can never be made, where the roads lead only in circles, where drivers who arrive can never leave. The town that moved off the map and into somewhere else, somewhere between, waiting forever for the next traveler to join its silent population. Story 5. The Voice in the Static. James Kowalski had been a long-haul trucker for 21 years, most of that time spent on cross-country routes. He preferred the solitude, the endless ribbon of highway, the way entire days could pass with nothing but the radio for company. His CB call sign was Night Rider, earned during his early years when he'd exclusively worked night shifts, and he'd heard just about every kind of transmission possible on those open channels. Truckers warning about speed traps and weather. Lonely drivers looking for conversation. Conspiracy theorists rambling about government surveillance. Kids playing with their parents' CB radios. Interference from electrical lines and radio towers. In 2 decades of monitoring Channel 19, James thought he'd heard it all. He was wrong. The transmission started on a Tuesday night in October, somewhere in Nevada on Interstate 80. James was hauling automotive parts from Sacramento to Salt Lake City, running about an hour behind schedule due to a delay at the loading dock. The highway was empty, just endless desert darkness broken by the occasional pair of headlights passing in the opposite direction. His CB had been quiet for over an hour, just the soft hiss of static that he'd learned to tune out. Then, cutting through the white noise, a voice. "Night Rider, do you copy?" James grabbed the microphone. "This is Night Rider, I copy." "Go ahead." A pause longer than normal. "Night Rider, this is Phantom requesting assistance. My position is uncertain. Can you provide location confirmation?" James frowned. "Phantom, this is Night Rider. I'm eastbound on I-80 at mile marker 273 just past Lovelock. What's your 20? Another long pause filled with crackling static. "I-80, yes. Eastbound. I think I'm near you, but my instruments aren't working correctly. Can you see my lights?" James checked his mirrors, scanned the highway ahead. Empty. Nothing but darkness and the distant glow of his own running lights reflecting off the mile markers. "Negative, Phantom, I don't see any lights. What are you driving? Are you on the shoulder?" The voice that responded sounded strained, confused. "I'm in a Kenworth hauling freight. I should be right there. You should be able to see me. I can see your lights, Night Rider. I'm right behind you." Cold prickled down James's spine. He looked in all 3 mirrors. Empty road behind him, no lights at all. "Phantom, I'm not seeing you. Are you sure you're on I-80? Maybe you're on a different highway." Static crackled for several seconds. "I'm where you are, Night Rider. How can you not see me? I'm following you. I've been following you for miles." James felt his heart rate increase. This was wrong. He pressed the CB button again. "Phantom, I need you to confirm your position. What's the last town you passed? What mile marker do you see?" The response came after another pause. I can't see the markers anymore. They're all the same number. That can't be right. Night Rider, something's wrong. Something happened. I've been driving for hours, but nothing's changing. The highway just keeps going. A chill ran through James. The voice sounded genuinely distressed, afraid. Phantom, stay calm. Tell me what you see around you. Describe your surroundings. Static then. Desert, just desert, dark. Stars overhead, but they're wrong. They're in the wrong positions. My GPS doesn't work. My phone doesn't work. The radio only gets this channel, only reaches you. Night Rider, where am I? James wasn't sure how to respond. This had to be someone playing a prank, but the fear in the voice sounded authentic. Phantom, I'm going to pull over at the next rest stop. If you're really behind me, you'll see me pull over. Can you do that? The voice responded immediately, desperately. Yes. Yes, I'll follow you. Please don't lose me. You're the only thing I can hear, the only voice in all this static. The next rest stop was 6 miles ahead. James watched his odometer count down the distance, checking his mirrors constantly. No lights appeared behind him. The highway remained empty. When he pulled into the rest stop, only 2 other vehicles were there, both cars, no trucks. James parked and grabbed his microphone. Phantom, I'm stopped at the rest area at mile marker 279. Do you see me? Static crackled, then the voice came back, and now it sounded panicked. I can't find it. I can't find the rest stop. I passed mile marker 279, but there was nothing there. Just empty highway. Night Rider, where did you go? I'm right here, Phantom. I'm parked at the rest stop. You should see it. There are lights. There are other vehicles. The voice was almost sobbing now. There's nothing here, just the road. Just the endless road in the dark, and the stars are wrong, and you're the only voice, and I don't know where I am. James sat in his truck, staring at the CB radio. This couldn't be real. But the transmission continued, the voice rambling now, words spilling out in a desperate rush. I left Reno 3 hours ago. Or maybe it was 3 days ago, I can't tell. The clock in my cab stopped, my watch stopped. But I keep driving because what else can I do? I keep following the highway and it keeps going and nothing changes, and you're the first person I've been able to reach. Phantom, tell me your name, James said, trying to keep his voice calm. What's your real name, not your call sign? Your actual name. A pause then. David Marsh. I drive for Continental Freight. I was hauling electronics from California to Nevada, but I don't know where I am now. I don't think I'm anywhere. James pulled out his phone and searched for David Marsh, Continental Freight, Nevada. The results made his blood run cold. There were several news articles from 6 months ago. Driver missing. Truck found abandoned on I-80 near Fernley, Nevada. Last contact with dispatcher reported no problems. Vehicle and cargo intact, but driver gone without a trace. Extensive search turned up nothing. 6 months ago. David Marsh had disappeared 6 months ago. David, James said carefully into the microphone. What's the date? What do you think it is? The voice responded without hesitation. It's October 14th, Tuesday. Why? Night Rider, why are you asking that? October 14th. Today's date, but David Marsh had disappeared in April. David, listen to me carefully. I need you to pull over, stop your truck, get out and look around. Tell me exactly what you see. James waited, listening to static. Then David's voice came back, and it was different now, hollow and strange. I pulled over, I'm outside the truck. Night Rider, the highway is here. My truck is here, but everything else is, it's like looking through fog. The desert is there, but it's not real. It's like a painting. The mountains in the distance don't have any detail. The stars overhead, I can see them, but they don't look right. They're too bright, too close. What about your truck? Look at your truck, David. Is it okay? A long pause. It looks old. Night Rider, my truck looks old. The paint is faded. There's rust. But that can't be right. I just inspected it yesterday. Everything was fine yesterday. James closed his eyes, trying to understand what he was hearing. David, I'm going to keep driving. Stay on this channel. Keep talking to me. Maybe if you follow my transmission, you can find your way back. The voice came back immediately, grateful. Yes, thank you. I'll follow you. Just keep talking so I can hear you. James pulled out of the rest stop and continued east on I-80, speaking into the CB every few minutes, describing what he was seeing, reading off mile markers, doing anything to maintain the connection. David responded each time, his voice a lifeline through the static, but his descriptions never matched. When James reported passing through a town, David saw only empty highway. When James described mountains to the south, David saw flat desert. It was like they were traveling the same road but in different dimensions, parallel paths that could hear each other but never touch. Hours passed. James crossed into Utah, still maintaining contact with David Marsh, still hearing that desperate voice following him through impossible distance. Other truckers occasionally broke into the transmission, asking what was going on, who James was talking to. But their CB radios only picked up James's side of the conversation. They couldn't hear David at all. As dawn approached, David's transmissions became stranger. "Night Rider, there are other vehicles now. I can see them, trucks mostly. They're on the road with me, but they're not moving right. They're gliding, not rolling. And the drivers, I can see faces in the windows. They're all looking at me. They're all watching. David, don't stop, keep driving, stay focused on my voice." James said, though he had no idea if that advice made any sense. "Night Rider, they're getting closer. The other trucks are surrounding me. They want me to stop. They want me to join them. I can hear other voices now on the radio. They're calling to me. They're saying I should stop fighting, that I should accept it, that I'm one of them now. Don't listen to them, David. Focus on me. You can find your way back." But even as James said it, he knew it wasn't true. David Marsh wasn't lost. David Marsh was gone, had been gone for 6 months. Whatever James was talking to, it wasn't a man driving a truck anymore. It was an echo, a fragment, something that had been left behind when David disappeared. "They're right," David's voice said, and it sounded calmer now, resigned. "I can feel it. I'm not really here anymore, am I? I'm somewhere else, somewhere between. The highway goes on forever here. Everyone here is lost, driving roads that don't lead anywhere, following routes that loop back on themselves. We're all just echoes, Night Rider, ghosts in the static. David, please, don't give up." James's voice cracked. The voice that responded was fading, breaking up into bursts of static. "It's okay. It's almost peaceful here in a way. No destinations, no deadlines, just the road and the night and the static. Thank you for talking to me, Night Rider. Thank you for reminding me I used to be real." "David," James shouted into the microphone, but only static answered. He tried again and again, calling out, but David Marsh was gone. After several minutes, James set down the microphone and focused on driving, his hands shaking on the wheel. At the next truck stop, James called the Continental Freight Dispatch office. He told them about the transmission, about talking to David Marsh. The dispatcher was silent for a long moment, then said, "That's impossible. David's truck was found months ago. Empty, and the CB radio was removed as evidence. It's sitting in a police evidence locker. It couldn't have been transmitting." James had no answer for that. He finished his delivery to Salt Lake City and drove back west, retracing his route. When he passed through Nevada again on I-80, he monitored Channel 19 carefully, listening for any sign of David's voice. He heard nothing unusual, just the normal chatter of truckers communicating across the highways. But sometimes, late at night, when James is driving through empty stretches of desert highway, the static on his CB radio changes. It develops patterns, rhythms that almost sound like words. And occasionally, just for a moment, he hears a voice that might be David Marsh, calling out from wherever lost drivers go, still following phantom headlights down an endless road, still driving through the dark, still trapped in the space between here and gone. James Kowalski retired from long-haul trucking 2 months after that night. He told his family he was ready for a change, wanted to be home more. But the real reason was simpler. He couldn't bear the thought of hearing that voice again, couldn't handle knowing that somewhere in the static David Marsh and countless others like him were still out there, still driving, still calling for help that would never come. The CB radio sits in James's garage now, unplugged and silent. But sometimes in the deep hours of night, he swears he can hear it anyway, a faint whisper of static that might be a voice, might be nothing, might be the sound of drivers who left the highways long ago but never stopped moving, never stopped searching for the way home. Story 6. The Delivery to Nowhere. Patricia Mills worked as an independent contractor, running a delivery service for specialty items across the Southwest. She drove a large cargo van, not quite a truck but bigger than standard delivery vehicles, perfect for the high-value items she transported. Art pieces, antiques, custom furniture, things that required careful handling and personal attention. She'd been doing it for 12 years, built a reputation for reliability and discretion. Her clients were wealthy, particular, and they trusted her with valuable cargo. The job came through on a Wednesday, referred by one of her regular clients. A single-item pickup in Santa Fe, delivery to an address in the middle of nowhere in western New Mexico. The fee was substantial, $3,000 for a single day's work. The client wanted same-day delivery, pickup at noon, delivery by 8 p.m. The item was a grandfather clock, antique and valuable, insured for $75,000. Patricia accepted the job and arrived at the Santa Fe address precisely at noon. It was an upscale art gallery in the historic district. The owner, a thin man in an expensive suit, led her to the back room where the clock stood wrapped in protective blankets. It was beautiful, dark wood intricately carved, the face showing Roman numerals behind curved glass. "Handle it carefully," the gallery owner said, though his tone was more anxious than stern. "The buyer has very specific requirements. You must deliver it to this address by 8 p.m. exactly. Not earlier, not later. 8 p.m. He handed her a card with an address written in elegant script. No name, just coordinates and a rural route number. Patricia loaded the clock carefully into her van, securing it with straps and padding. She entered the address into her GPS and frowned. The location was over 200 miles away, deep in the desert near the Arizona border. According to the map, it wasn't near any town, just empty backcountry. But the fee was good, and she delivered to remote locations before. Rich people sometimes built estates in the middle of nowhere, wanting privacy and views. She left Santa Fe at 12:30, giving her plenty of time to make the 8 p.m. deadline. The route took her south on I-25, then west on various highways that grew progressively smaller and less maintained. By 4 p.m., she was on a 2-lane county road cutting through harsh desert landscape, sagebrush and red rock formations under a merciless sun. The GPS showed 2 hours remaining to her destination. Patricia drove carefully, conscious of the valuable cargo in the back. The grandfather clock had shifted slightly despite the padding, and she could hear it creaking as the van bounced over rough pavement. She'd need to check the straps at her next stop. Around 6 p.m., the GPS directed her onto a dirt road. Patricia hesitated, studying the route. This couldn't be right. The dirt road looked barely maintained, more like a hiking trail than anything meant for vehicles. But the GPS insisted, and when she cross-referenced the coordinates on her phone, they matched. The delivery address was 12 miles down this road. Patricia engaged the van's 4-wheel drive and proceeded slowly. The road was rough, full of rocks and deep ruts. Dust billowed around her vehicle, coating the windows. The sun was getting lower, casting long shadows across the landscape. She saw no signs of habitation, no power lines, no fences, nothing to indicate anyone lived out here. At 7:30, with 30 minutes until her deadline, Patricia saw a structure ahead. It looked like a house, a large adobe building with a flat roof, sitting alone in a small valley. Relief flooded through her. She demade it. She pulled up to the house and parked, checking the coordinates one final time. This was the place. The house looked old, maybe 60 or 70 years, but well maintained. The walls were thick adobe, painted white that had faded to cream. There were no windows on the front face, just a heavy wooden door. No vehicles were visible, no signs of life. Patricia got out of her van, her boots crunching on gravel, and approached the door. She knocked. The sound echoed strangely, seeming to travel into the house and fade away gradually rather than stopping abruptly. No answer. She knocked again, louder. "Hello, I have a delivery from Santa Fe. Is anyone home?" Silence answered her. Patricia checked her phone. 7:45. 15 minutes until her 8 p.m. deadline. The client had been very specific about the time. Maybe they were expecting her to simply leave the clock, but that didn't make sense for such a valuable item. She tried the door handle. Locked. She walked around the house, looking for another entrance or a window. The other walls were identical, blank adobe with no openings except for a single window on the back wall, covered with heavy shutters. No doorbell, no intercom, nothing. Patricia returned to the front door and knocked one more time. "Hello, I have your grandfather clock. I need someone to sign for it." Her voice echoed across the empty desert and died away. She stood there, uncertain what to do. She couldn't just leave a $75,000 antique sitting in the desert, but she also couldn't wait indefinitely. And the client had been clear about the 8 p.m. deadline. At 7:55, Patricia made a decision. She would unload the clock, place it by the front door under cover of the small overhang, take photos as proof of delivery, and leave. It wasn't ideal, but she had followed her instructions to the letter. She delivered to the correct address at the correct time. She opened her van's rear doors and began carefully maneuvering the wrapped clock out. It was heavy, nearly 200 pounds, and awkward to move. She got it onto a dolly and wheeled it up to the front door, positioning it against the wall. As she was unwrapping the protective blankets to verify the clock was undamaged, she heard the mechanism inside begin to chime. The sound was deep and resonant, 8 clear notes marking 8 p.m. Patricia looked at her phone. It was exactly 8 o'clock. The clock had somehow kept perfect time despite being moved and jostled. Each chime seemed to hang in the desert air, vibrating through the ground beneath her feet. On the 8th chime, the front door opened. There was no one behind it. The door simply swung inward on well-oiled hinges, revealing darkness beyond. Patricia stood frozen, staring into the black interior of the house. "Hello," she called out. Her voice didn't echo. It was swallowed by the darkness, absorbed completely. A voice responded from inside, male and deep and strangely inflected. "Bring it inside. Place it in the hall." Patricia's instinct was to refuse, to get back in her van and drive away. But $3,000 was $3,000, and she'd technically completed her delivery. A few more minutes wouldn't hurt. She wheeled the dolly inside, the clock balanced on it. The interior was cooler than the outside air, almost cold. As her eyes adjusted, she could see that she was in an entrance hall. The floor was tiled with intricate geometric patterns. The walls were bare adobe, smooth and white. There was no furniture, no decorations, nothing except for marks on the walls where other pieces had once hung, shadows and rectangles showing where frames had protected the plaster from fading. "Further in," the voice said, "to the center of the house." Patricia hesitated. "I need someone to sign for the delivery, and I need to verify the clock is undamaged before I leave." The voice didn't respond immediately. "Then, proceed to the center. All will be addressed there." Against her better judgment, Patricia pushed the dolly forward. The hall led deeper into the house, branching into other corridors. She followed what seemed to be the main passage, noting that every room she passed was empty, bare walls and tiled floors with nothing else. The house felt enormous, much larger than it had appeared from outside. The hallway opened into a circular room, a domed space with a hole in the ceiling that let in the last rays of sunlight. In the center of the room stood a man. He was tall, dressed in clothing that looked antique, a formal suit from perhaps the 1920s. His face was shadowed despite the light from above, features indistinct. "The timepiece," he said. "Place it here." He gestured to a spot on the floor marked with painted symbols. Patricia wheeled the clock over and positioned it on the mark. The man approached and unwrapped it completely, running his hands over the wood, checking the mechanism. Patricia watched, confused and increasingly uneasy. "It's perfect," the man said. "Exactly what was required." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Your payment, the full amount plus a bonus for your punctuality." He held it out and Patricia took it automatically. The envelope felt thick, stuffed with bills. "I need you to sign a receipt," Patricia said, trying to maintain professional composure despite the strangeness of the situation. The man nodded and produced a small book from another pocket. He signed it with a fountain pen, his handwriting elaborate and old-fashioned. Patricia took the book and looked at the signature. It was illegible, just flourishes and loops. "What's the clock for?" she asked, unable to stop herself. "Why does it need to be here at exactly 8 p.m.? The man looked at her, and for the first time she could see his face clearly. He looked normal except for his eyes, which were completely black, no whites at all. "Time is specific here," he said. "We exist at certain hours only. 8 p.m. is our beginning. Midnight is our end. Between those hours, we are real. The clock helps us maintain the schedule. Without it, we would drift, become unmoored from time entirely." Patricia backed toward the doorway. "I've made the delivery. I'll be leaving now." The man nodded. "Of course. The door is open. Follow the hallway back. It will take you out." Patricia turned and walked quickly, resisting the urge to run. Behind her, she heard the clock being wound, the mechanism engaging, the steady tick-tock beginning. The hallway stretched ahead, much longer than it had been when she'd entered. Patricia walked faster, her footsteps echoing. The light from the entrance should have been visible, but the corridor remained dim, illuminated only by the fading daylight filtering through the hole in the central room behind her. She passed rooms that now had furniture, though the items looked antique and rotted. She passed doorways where figures stood watching, people dressed in old-fashioned clothing, their faces pale and expressionless. None of them moved, they just stood and watched her pass. The hallway began to curve, and Patricia realized with growing panic that she was no longer heading in a straight line back to the entrance. She was spiraling, moving in a slow circle through the house. She broke into a run, desperate to find the exit. Ahead, she saw light. The front door, standing open just as she'd left it. Patricia sprinted for it and burst out into the desert night. Stars blazed overhead, thousands of them, more than should be visible. Her van was there, exactly where she'd parked it. She ran to it, threw herself into the driver's seat and started the engine. As she drove away, she looked in her rearview mirror. The house was gone. Just empty desert, no structure, no sign that anything had ever been there. She stopped the van and got out, staring at the spot where the house had stood. Nothing. Just sand and rocks and scrub brush. Patricia drove the dirt road back to the highway in a daze. She checked the envelope the man had given her. It was full of $100 bills, exactly $3,000 plus an extra $500. Real money, not counterfeit, not old currency. Current bills with recent serial numbers. When she returned to Santa Fe the next day, she went to the art gallery to confirm the delivery. The gallery was closed, a for lease sign in the window. She called the number from her original job contract. Disconnected. She checked her records, the email address that had sent her the delivery details. Bounced back, account didn't exist. Patricia tried to find the house again, driving back to those coordinates with a friend in daylight this time. They found nothing, just empty desert. Her GPS showed no structure had ever been there. But the money was real, sitting in her bank account, proof that something had happened. She never took another job to remote coordinates. She turned down deliveries that seemed too strange, that offered too much money for too little work. She de-learned that some addresses exist only at certain times, that some clients live in hours rather than places, and that some deliveries are meant for destinations that aren't entirely in this world. Patricia Mills still drives her delivery van through the Southwest, still transports valuable items for wealthy clients. But now she checks every address carefully, makes sure it corresponds to a real place with real people. Because she knows now that some roads lead to nowhere, that some houses appear only when they're needed, and that some deliveries are accepted by customers who exist only in the narrow spaces between minutes, between the tick and the tock, in the time that a grandfather clock measures but that never quite feels real. Story 7. The Wrong Truck Stop. Leonard Hayes had been driving refrigerated trucks for 18 years, specializing in food transport across the eastern United States. His current route was standard, picking up a load of frozen meat in Chicago and delivering it to a distribution center in Atlanta. The cargo had to maintain 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and Leonard monitored the refrigeration unit's temperature constantly, checking it every hour without fail. He left Chicago at 4 p.m. on a Friday, planning to drive through the night and arrive in Atlanta by Saturday afternoon. The route was familiar, taking Interstate 65 south through Indiana and into Kentucky before connecting to I-75. Leonard had driven this combination hundreds of times, could almost do it with his eyes closed. Around midnight, somewhere in central Kentucky, Leonard felt the call of nature and decided to pull off at the next truck stop. According to his GPS, there was a major travel plaza coming up in 6 miles, one he'd stopped at many times before. Good facilities, decent food, and enough parking for trucks. He took the exit and followed the ramp toward the plaza. The parking lot was busier than usual, nearly full of trucks. Leonard found a spot in the back row and parked, checking his refrigeration unit before heading inside. Everything was functioning normally, temperature holding steady at 0. He locked the truck and walked toward the main building. Something felt off about the place, though Leonard couldn't immediately identify what. The building looked the same, the layout familiar, but the lighting seemed wrong, dimmer than he remembered, and there was a strange smell in the air, like ozone before a thunderstorm. Inside, the travel plaza was crowded. Dozens of truckers filled the restaurant and convenience store areas, standing in groups or sitting at tables. Leonard nodded to a few familiar faces, drivers he recognized from other stops on his regular routes. He headed to the restroom, then to the restaurant to grab coffee. The woman behind the counter looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. "Coffee?" she asked in a monotone. Leonard nodded and watched as she poured a cup from a pot that looked like it had been sitting there for hours. The coffee was thick and black, almost syrupy. He paid and took a sip. It was awful, burnt and bitter, but he'd had worse. Leonard sat at a corner table and pulled out his phone to check messages. No signal. That wasn't unusual in rural areas, but this travel plaza usually had decent reception. He stood and walked to the window, trying to get a better signal. Outside, under the parking lot lights, he could see his truck and dozens of others, all parked in neat rows. That's when he noticed something strange. None of the trucks were running. Normally, at a truck stop at night, most refrigerated trucks would have their engines running to power the cooling units. But outside, every truck was silent, dark except for the occasional running light. Leonard felt a chill. His truck should be running. He'd left it on specifically to keep the refrigeration unit operating. He headed for the exit, coffee forgotten on the table. As he walked through the restaurant, he noticed that none of the other truckers were eating. They were sitting at tables with food in front of them, but nobody was actually eating or drinking. They just sat there, staring at their phones or at nothing at all. Outside, Leonard jogged to his truck. The engine was off. He climbed into the cab and checked the controls. Everything was in the position he'd left it, but the truck wasn't running. He turned the key. Nothing happened. No turnover, no click, nothing. The battery was dead, completely drained. He checked the refrigeration unit. The temperature display was blank. Leonard opened the trailer and felt warm air wash over him. His cargo was thawing. In the hours since he'd parked, the refrigeration had failed and the frozen meat was starting to spoil. This was a disaster. The load was worth over $50,000, and his contract required he maintain proper temperature at all times. Leonard grabbed his phone to call his dispatcher. Still no signal. He ran back inside to use the payphone he'd seen near the restrooms. The phone looked ancient, old push-button model with a rotary-style handset. He lifted it. No dial tone, just silence. "Excuse me," Leonard said to the woman behind the counter. "Something's wrong with my truck. Can I use your phone to call my dispatch?" The woman looked at him with those exhausted eyes. "Phone doesn't work." Leonard blinked. "What do you mean it doesn't work? You must have a working phone. What if there's an emergency?" The woman just shrugged. "It doesn't work. Nothing works here." Leonard looked around the restaurant with growing unease. The other truckers were still sitting motionless at their tables. "Hey," he called out. "Does anyone have a working phone? I need to make a call." None of them responded. They didn't even look at him. It was like he'd become invisible. He approached one of the tables where a driver sat alone, staring at a plate of eggs. Leonard recognized him, a guy named Tom who ran routes through the Midwest. "Tom. Hey, Tom, can you hear me?" Tom didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the plate, but he wasn't eating. Leonard waved his hand in front of Tom's face. No response. Fighting panic, Leonard grabbed Tom's shoulder and shook him. The man's body was cold, unnaturally cold, like he'd been sitting in a freezer. Leonard jerked his hand back and looked closer. Tom wasn't breathing. None of the drivers were breathing. They were all sitting there, perfectly still, like mannequins arranged in tableaus of normal truck stop activity. Leonard backed away, heart pounding. This couldn't be real. He must be asleep, having a nightmare. But the smell was too vivid, the cold of Tom's shoulder too specific. This felt real. He ran for the exit, burst through the doors into the parking lot. The trucks were still there, row after row of them. Leonard ran down the first aisle, looking at license plates, reading company names. He recognized several of them, trucks he'd seen at other stops, vehicles he'd passed on the highways. But all of them were silent and dark. He tried the door of one truck, found it unlocked, and climbed up to look inside. The cab was empty, keys in the ignition. He tried starting it. Nothing, same as his truck. Dead battery, no power. He jumped down and tried another truck. Same result. Every vehicle in the parking lot was inoperable, drained of power. Leonard walked back toward the building, his breath coming in quick gasps. This had to be some kind of electrical problem, maybe a powerful imp or something. But that didn't explain the drivers inside, didn't explain why they were sitting there frozen and cold. He noticed the sign at the entrance to the parking lot, the big illuminated sign that advertised the Travel Plaza's name and amenities. Travelers Rest Plaza, it read in large letters, but beneath that, in smaller text, there was a line he didn't remember seeing before. Established 1974, closed 2003. Closed. This place was closed. But the lights were on, the building was open. There were dozens of trucks in the parking lot. Leonard walked closer to the building and looked at the windows. Through the glass, he could see the restaurant, see the motionless drivers, see the woman behind the counter. But the glass itself was dirty, covered in years of grime and dust. The doors were chained shut from the inside, heavy padlock and chain visible through the glass. But Leonard had just walked through those doors. They hadn't been chained. He'd been inside, he'd gotten coffee from the woman, he'd walked through the restaurant. How could the doors be chained? He ran around the building, checking every entrance. All of them were chained, padlocked, clearly abandoned. The windows were dark despite what he could see through them. The entire building showed signs of long abandonment, paint peeling, gutters hanging loose, parking lot cracked and overgrown with weeds. Leonard stood in the middle of the parking lot, turning in circles, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The building looked abandoned, but he could see lights and people inside. The trucks looked operational, but none of them would start. Everything contradicted itself, existing in two states simultaneously. A sound broke the silence, a low rumbling. Leonard turned toward the highway and saw lights approaching, a vehicle exiting onto the ramp. Another truck, a big Peterbilt, pulling a refrigerated trailer. The truck drove into the parking lot and began looking for a space. Leonard ran toward it, waving his arms. "Stop! Don't park here, something's wrong with this place." The Peterbilt continued driving, the driver apparently not seeing Leonard. It found an empty spot and backed in, air brakes hissing. The engine shut off. Leonard ran up to the cab and pounded on the door. "Don't go inside. Listen to me, something's wrong here." The driver climbed down, a younger man in his 30s. He looked right through Leonard like he wasn't there. Leonard grabbed the man's arm. His hand passed through it, encountering no resistance. The driver walked toward the building and Leonard followed, pleading with him to stop, to listen. The driver reached the doors and pulled them open. No chains, no locks. The doors swung freely. He walked inside and Leonard tried to follow but found himself unable to enter. An invisible barrier prevented him from passing through the doorway. He pressed against it, watching as the driver approached the counter, as the exhausted woman poured him coffee, as he sat down at a table with other motionless truckers. Leonard watched as the driver's movements began to slow, watched as he became still, watched as he stopped breathing and sat frozen like all the others. Within minutes, he'd become another permanent resident of the Travelers' Rest Plaza, trapped in whatever this place was. Leonard backed away from the building. He couldn't help the driver. He couldn't even enter anymore. Somehow, he'd been ejected, pushed out of the place's effect. He was in the parking lot, but no longer part of it. He walked back to his truck, even though he knew it wouldn't start. He climbed into the cab and sat in the driver's seat, trying to think. His cargo was spoiling, his delivery was going to fail, his career might be over. But more than that, he'd almost become one of those frozen figures inside. If he'd stayed just a few minutes longer, would he have been trapped too? Leonard sat there until dawn. As the sun rose, the parking lot changed. The trucks began to fade, becoming transparent, then disappearing completely. The building shimmered and vanished. Within minutes, he was sitting alone on an empty, cracked parking lot, overgrown with weeds, the concrete broken and buckled. A rusted sign lay fallen near what used to be the entrance. Travelers' Rest Plaza closed. His truck wouldn't start, battery completely drained, but his phone had signal now. He called his dispatcher, reported a breakdown, and requested a tow. While he waited, he researched the travel plaza on his phone. It had indeed closed in 2003, demolished in 2005. The land had never been redeveloped, just left empty. But there were stories. Dozens of reports over the years of drivers claiming to have stopped at a truck stop that shouldn't exist, finding it full of other truckers who never moved or spoke. Some drivers never left, their trucks found abandoned on highways near the old exit, no trace of the drivers themselves. Missing persons cases that were never solved. Leonard Hayes was lucky. He'd gotten out. The tow truck arrived, jumped his battery, and he was able to drive away. His cargo was spoiled, the company took a loss, but Leonard kept his job. He never took that route again, though. Never drove past that exit. And he told other drivers to avoid it too, though most thought he'd just fallen asleep and had a vivid dream. But sometimes, late at night, drivers report seeing a fully operational travel plaza where only empty land should be. They see lights in the parking lot, see dozens of trucks, see what looks like a busy truck stop. And if they're tired enough, desperate enough for rest, they take the exit. Most of them never leave. They become part of the permanent population of Travelers' Rest Plaza, forever stopped at a place that doesn't exist, forever waiting for dawn that never comes, trapped in the hours between midnight and morning when the boundary between road and rest becomes thin enough for the wrong places to appear. Story 8. The convoy that wasn't alive. Daniel Reeves drove for Western Freight, running specialized loads across the western states. He had 16 years of experience, most of it hauling hazardous materials that required special licensing and training. On this particular trip, he was transporting industrial chemicals from Houston to Phoenix, dangerous cargo that required careful handling and constant monitoring. The route took him west on Interstate 10, a long straight shot through Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Daniel left Houston on a Thursday evening, planning to make the run straight through with only brief stops for fuel and food. The cargo was time-sensitive, needed at a manufacturing plant by Saturday morning. He drove through the night, making good time across Texas. Around 3 a.m., somewhere between Fort Stockton and Van Horn, Daniel noticed headlights behind him. Another truck had come up fast and was maintaining position about a quarter-mile back. Daniel checked his speed, confirmed he was doing the limit, and moved to the right lane to let the other truck pass. But it didn't pass. It just stayed behind him, maintaining that exact distance. Daniel could see it clearly in his mirrors, a large semi-truck with a standard trailer, running lights glowing. After 10 minutes of this, Daniel grabbed his CB radio. "This is Hazmat Express to the truck behind me on I-10 westbound. You looking to pass, driver?" No response. Just static. Daniel tried again. "Truck following Hazmat Express, do you copy?" Still nothing. Maybe the other driver didn't have his CB on or was on a different channel. Daniel shrugged and focused on his own driving. If the guy wanted to sit behind him, that was his choice. Another hour passed. The truck was still there, same distance behind, never varying. Daniel started to feel uneasy. This was strange behavior. Drivers didn't usually follow each other like this unless they were running in a convoy, and convoy drivers communicated, coordinated their movements. This truck was just following. Then Daniel noticed more headlights. 2 more trucks had joined them, one on either side of the first follower. Now there were 3 trucks maintaining formation behind him, all staying exactly the same distance back, all moving together like they were connected. Daniel's unease increased. He sped up slightly, bringing his speed to 70. The trucks behind him accelerated exactly in sync, maintaining their positions. He slowed down to 60. They slowed with him. It was like they were locked onto him, tracking his every movement. He grabbed the CB again. "This is Hazmat Express to the convoy behind me. What's going on back there? Why are you following me?" Static answered, but this time there was something in it, a pattern, almost like breathing. Daniel turned up the volume, listening carefully. Yes, definitely breathing, slow and rhythmic, coming through the CB speaker. "Who is this?" Daniel demanded. The breathing continued unchanged. Then a voice, distorted and strange. "Keep driving, don't stop, we're with you now." Daniel's blood ran cold. "Who are you? What do you want?" The voice came again, layered, multiple voices speaking as one. "We're going where you're going, Phoenix. We need to go to Phoenix." Daniel looked in his mirrors. The 3 trucks were still there, perfectly spaced, moving in exact synchronization. "Why are you following me? Identify yourselves." The layered voices responded, "We can't stop. If we stop, we cease. We follow the ones who still move, the ones who are still real." Daniel's hands were shaking on the wheel. This was insane. He looked for an exit, planning to pull off and let these trucks pass, let them go harass someone else. There was a rest area coming up in 2 miles. He activated his turn signal and started to move toward the exit lane. The trucks behind him turned on their high beams, flooding his cab with blinding light. The CB crackled. "Don't stop. You can't stop. If you stop, you become like us. Keep driving." Daniel squinted against the glare, his heart pounding. He canceled his turn signal and stayed in the travel lane. The high beams switched off. The voices came again. "Good, keep going, Phoenix. We have to reach Phoenix." Daniel tried a different approach. "Okay, you want to go to Phoenix, fine, but give me some space. You're too close, back off." The trucks didn't move. They maintained their exact positions, quarter-mile back, 3 abreast. Daniel realized they weren't going to leave. Whatever these trucks were, whoever was driving them, they were locked onto him. He was leading some kind of phantom convoy across the desert, and he had no idea how to break free. As dawn approached, Daniel could see the trucks more clearly in his mirrors. They looked old, like vehicles from the 70s or 80s, but they were moving perfectly, no smoke, no visible mechanical issues. He tried to read the license plates, but they were too far away, just blurs of metal reflecting the rising sun. Daniel pulled into a truck stop at Van Horn, desperate for fuel and a break. He pulled up to the pumps and stopped. The 3 trucks pulled into the parking lot but didn't stop. They circled slowly, moving around the perimeter of the lot like sharks, never coming to rest. Daniel jumped out and ran inside looking for help. "There are trucks following me," he told the clerk, a bored-looking teenager. "3 of them. They've been following me for hours. Can you call the police?" The teenager looked out the window. "I don't see any trucks except yours, man." Daniel turned. The parking lot was empty except for his rig at the pumps and a couple of cars. The 3 trucks were gone. Relief flooded through him. Maybe they'd given up, moved on to follow someone else. Daniel filled his tank, used the restroom, bought coffee. He felt better, more in control. The whole thing had probably been his imagination, fatigue playing tricks. He'd been driving all night with hazardous cargo. Stress could do strange things to perception. He got back in his truck and pulled onto the highway, heading west toward New Mexico. Within 10 minutes, the 3 trucks reappeared behind him, same formation, same distance. Daniel's relief evaporated. They were back, or maybe they'd never left. Maybe only he could see them. The day wore on, sun climbing in a cloudless sky, temperature rising into the 90s. The trucks followed. Daniel tried everything. He sped up to 80, pushed his rig to the limit. They kept pace. He slowed to 50, forcing other traffic to pass him. They slowed with him, maintaining that precise quarter-mile distance. He took random exits, stopped at rest areas, changed routes. Nothing worked. As soon as he was back on the highway heading west, they were there. Daniel called his dispatcher on his cell phone. "I need to report something weird. There are trucks following me. 3 of them. They won't leave me alone." The dispatcher sounded confused. "Following you how? Are they tailgating? You want me to call highway patrol?" Daniel struggled to explain. "No, they're staying back, but they're definitely following. They move when I move, stop when I stop. It's like they're connected to me." There was a long pause. "Daniel, have you been getting enough sleep? When's the last time you took a break?" Daniel felt anger flash through him. "I'm not hallucinating. They're real. I can see them in my mirrors." The dispatcher's tone became soothing, careful. Okay, why don't you pull over, get some rest? The delivery can wait a few hours. Your safety is more important." Daniel hung up. He knew what that tone meant. The dispatcher thought he was cracking up, seeing things. Maybe he was. He looked in his mirrors. The trucks were there, solid and real looking. But the clerk at the truck stop hadn't seen them. Maybe no one else could. He drove on through New Mexico and into Arizona, the 3 trucks following like a funeral procession. As afternoon turned to evening, Daniel noticed something new. The trucks were getting closer. The quarter-mile distance was shrinking. Now they were maybe 1/8 of a mile back. Still in formation, still perfectly synchronized, but definitely closer. "Stop it," Daniel shouted, keying his CB. "Stay back, don't come any closer," the layered voices responded. "Phoenix is close, we feel it, we're almost real again, almost solid, your movement gives us form, your reality bleeds into us." Daniel's skin crawled. "What are you? What the hell are you?" The voices came back, sad and hollow. "We were drivers like you, but we stopped. We pulled over in the wrong place at the wrong time, between the miles, between the moments. We stopped existing, but we couldn't stop driving. So we follow the ones who are still real. We borrow their reality. And sometimes, if we follow long enough, if we get close enough, we can become real again." "By doing what?" Daniel's voice cracked. "By taking my place. By making me become like you." The voices didn't answer, but the silence was confirmation enough. The trucks were closer now, less than 100 yards back. Daniel could see details he hadn't been able to see before. The cabs were empty. No drivers. The steering wheels were turning themselves, moving in response to his movements. The trucks were driving themselves or being driven by something invisible. Phoenix appeared on the horizon as the sun set, the city lights glowing against the darkening sky. Daniel had never been so terrified to reach a destination. What would happen when he got there? Would the trucks follow him to the delivery site? Would they come close enough to what? Merge with him, replace him. "Stay back," he shouted into the CB. "I'm warning you, stay back." The voices responded, eager now, hungry. "Phoenix, almost there, almost real. Thank you for carrying us. Thank you for giving us form." The trucks were 50 yards back. Daniel could see them clearly now, could see that they weren't quite solid. The running lights glowed but didn't quite illuminate the ground beneath. The wheels turned but didn't quite touch the pavement. They were ghosts, impressions of trucks rather than actual vehicles, and they were using his reality to become more real. Daniel made a decision. He couldn't lead them to Phoenix, couldn't risk them following him into the city. He took a sudden exit, no signal, yanking the wheel hard. His truck tilted, the trailer swinging out. He fought for control, hearing his cargo shift despite the securing straps. Behind him, the three trucks tried to follow, but they weren't quite solid enough, weren't quite real enough. They couldn't make the sharp turn. They continued straight, passing the exit, and for a moment Daniel saw them flicker, becoming transparent. He drove down the exit ramp and pulled into a gas station, his heart hammering. He looked back toward the highway. The three trucks were visible on the interstate, stopped in the middle of the road, engines silent. Other traffic was passing through them like they weren't there. They flickered, fading in and out of visibility. Then they vanished completely, gone. The highway was normal traffic flowing, no ghost trucks. Daniel sat in his cab, breathing hard, waiting to see if they'd reappear. Minutes passed. Nothing. They were gone. Daniel sat there for an hour, watching, waiting. The trucks didn't return. Finally, he started his engine and took back roads into Phoenix, avoiding the interstate, taking a circuitous route that added 2 hours to his trip. He made the delivery Saturday morning, late but safe. The cargo was intact. He never told anyone the full story. His dispatcher had already suggested he was cracking up, and he didn't want to lose his job. But Daniel requested a transfer to shorter routes after that. Nothing more than 300 miles, nothing overnight. He told the company he wanted to be home more, wanted better hours. The truth was simpler. He was terrified of the long, empty stretches of highway where the boundary between real and unreal became thin, where trucks that had stopped existing could latch onto drivers who were still solid, still moving, still real. He was afraid of becoming like them. One of the ghost drivers endlessly following, eternally between destinations, never arriving, never stopping, caught forever in the act of driving with no beginning and no end. Sometimes, other drivers report seeing strange convoys on Interstate 10 through West Texas and New Mexico. 3 trucks moving in perfect formation, following another vehicle, matching its every movement. The lead truck is always different, always real, piloted by an actual driver who has no idea what's following. But the 3 behind are always the same, ghost trucks crewed by nothing, driven by the desperate need to be real again, borrowing existence from whoever they follow, hoping that this time this driver, this journey will be the one that brings them back across the line between gone and here. Story 9. The Road That Breathed. Catherine Rodriguez had been a long-haul trucker for 14 years, running routes primarily through the Deep South. She specialized in agricultural transport, moving crops and livestock feed between distribution centers. Her current load was standard, 20 tons of soybeans from Mississippi to a processing plant in southern Alabama. The route would take her through rural backroads she knew well, 2-lane highways cutting through pine forests and farmland. She left the Mississippi depot around 9 p.m. on a humid July night, thunder rumbling in the distance but no rain yet. Catherine preferred driving at night during the summer, when temperatures were cooler and traffic was lighter. Her truck's air conditioning hummed steadily, keeping the cab comfortable. She had her playlist of audiobooks ready, 6 hours of driving ahead. The first hour was uneventful, passing through small towns that rolled up their sidewalks after dark. Around 10:30, Catherine turned onto Highway 43, a narrow 2-lane road that would cut 40 miles off her route. She'd driven it dozens of times, knew every curve and dip. The road wound through dense pine forest, no houses or businesses, just trees pressing close on either side. About 20 minutes down Highway 43, Catherine noticed something odd. The road's surface was moving. Not cracking or buckling, but actually moving, rising and falling in a slow rhythm. She blinked, checked her mirrors, wondering if she was seeing things. But no, the pavement ahead was definitely undulating, swelling up and then sinking down like something was breathing beneath it. Catherine slowed, watching carefully. The movement was subtle but unmistakable, the entire road surface rising perhaps 6 inches and then settling back. It happened slowly, taking maybe 10 seconds to complete each cycle. Rise, fall, breathing. She almost stopped, almost turned around. But she told herself she was being ridiculous. Roads didn't breathe. This had to be some kind of optical illusion, maybe heat shimmer despite the night air, or shadows from her headlights creating a false impression of movement. She'd driven thousands of miles, seen all kinds of weird visual phenomena. This was probably nothing. Catherine continued forward, and her truck drove onto the breathing section of road. Immediately, she felt it through the steering wheel, through the seat. The truck was rising and falling with the road's rhythm, gently rocking. It felt like driving on a very slow, very long wave. Her cargo shifted slightly in the trailer, soybeans rustling. The sensation was deeply unsettling. Catherine's instincts screamed at her to turn around to get off this road. But when she looked in her mirrors, the road behind her was also breathing, also moving. She was surrounded by it now, on a living section of highway. Turning around wouldn't help, she'd still have to drive across it. She pressed down on the accelerator, hoping to get through the breathing section quickly. But as her speed increased, the road's breathing became faster. The rise and fall accelerated to match her speed, the cycle compressing from 10 seconds to 5, then 3. Her truck bounced harder, suspension working overtime. In the trailer, her cargo was shifting more dramatically. She could hear the soybeans sloshing like liquid. Catherine slowed back down, and the road's breathing slowed with her. It was responding to her, matching her rhythm. She was breathing with the road, or it was breathing with her, she couldn't tell which. Every breath she took seemed to synchronize with the road's rise and fall. She grabbed her CB radio. "This is Southern Harvest calling any driver on Highway 43. Does anyone copy?" Static answered, but it had a pattern in and out like breathing. "This is Southern Harvest. Is anyone out there?" The static continued its rhythmic pulse. Catherine tried her cell phone. No signal, which wasn't unusual in these remote areas. She was on her own. She kept driving, maintaining a steady 40 miles per hour, feeling the road breathe beneath her. The pine trees on either side seemed to be swaying in rhythm with the road, though there was no wind. Everything was moving together, breathing together. Then she noticed her own breathing had completely synchronized with the road. She was inhaling as it rose, exhaling as it fell. She tried to break the pattern, tried to hold her breath, but her lungs wouldn't cooperate. Her breathing was locked to the road's rhythm, automatic and unchangeable. Panic crept into Catherine's chest. This wasn't natural. This was wrong. She needed to get off this highway, needed to find a side road any way out. But the forest pressed close on both sides, unbroken wall of pines, no intersections visible. The breathing began to change. It was getting deeper, the rises higher, the falls lower. Catherine's truck rocked more dramatically, and she gripped the wheel tight, fighting to keep control. Her own breathing deepened to match, long, slow inhalations that filled her lungs completely, long, slow exhalations that emptied them. She was hyperventilating, getting too much oxygen, feeling lightheaded. "Stop it," she shouted to the road, to herself, to whatever was causing this. "Let me go." But the breathing continued, deeper and deeper. The road was rising 15 inches now, then 20. Catherine's truck bounced violently with each cycle. In the trailer, the soybeans were shifting dangerously. If this continued, the load would become unbalanced, the trailer could tip. Catherine forced herself to stay calm, to think rationally despite the fear. If the road was responding to her, matching her rhythm, maybe she could control it. She focused on her breathing, tried to slow it deliberately. Slow breath in, slow breath out. Calm and steady. The road's breathing slowed with hers. The rises became gentler, the falls shallower. Yes, she was doing it. She was controlling it. Catherine maintained the slow breathing, feeling the road calm beneath her. The truck's violent rocking settled into gentle undulation. For several miles, Catherine drove in this synchronized state, her breathing controlling the road, keeping it calm. She started to feel a strange connection to the pavement beneath her, like she was part of it, like her truck was a cell moving through a living organism. The feeling was disturbing but also oddly peaceful. As long as she maintained the rhythm, everything was fine. Then her phone rang. The sudden sound shattered her concentration. Catherine gasped, her breathing pattern breaking. The road responded instantly, bucking violently. Her truck lurched upward as the pavement swelled, then dropped hard as it fell. Catherine fought the wheel, trying to regain control, but her breathing was chaotic now, irregular gasps, and she couldn't get back into rhythm. The road went wild. It heaved and thrashed like something in pain, rising and falling unpredictably. Catherine's truck bounced and swayed, tires losing contact with the pavement. She felt the trailer start to tip, heard her cargo slam against one side. She was going to roll. At 40 miles per hour on a road that wouldn't stay still, she was going to roll her truck. Catherine slammed on the brakes, bringing the truck to a stop. The road beneath her continued to thrash, but at least she wasn't moving. She sat perfectly still, forcing herself to breathe slowly and steadily despite her terror. In, out, calm and controlled. Gradually, the road began to calm. The thrashing subsided into gentler movement, syncing with her controlled breathing. Within a minute, it had returned to the slow, steady rhythm. Rise and fall, rise and fall. Catherine sat there, hands on the wheel, breathing with the road, not daring to move. She stayed like that for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Then slowly she released the brake and began driving again. She kept her breathing absolutely steady, focused entirely on maintaining the rhythm. Nothing else mattered, not the delivery schedule, not her physical discomfort, not her fear, just the breathing. Mile after mile passed. The pine forest continued on both sides, endless and dark. Catherine started to wonder if Highway 43 had become infinite, if she'd ever reach the other end. Maybe this was her existence now, driving forever on a breathing road, maintaining the rhythm that kept everything calm, a symbiotic relationship that could never end. Then ahead in her headlights, she saw something different. A sign, yellow and reflective, Highway 43 end 1 mile. Relief flooded through Catherine, and she immediately felt her breathing quicken with emotion. The road responded, starting to rise higher. No, she couldn't lose control now, not when she was so close. Catherine forced herself back into the slow, steady rhythm. The road calmed. She drove that last mile with intense concentration, maintaining the pattern, keeping everything synchronized. The sign appeared, Highway 43 end. The road ahead changed from the smooth pavement to rougher asphalt. Catherine drove across the boundary. The breathing stopped. The road became normal, solid, unmoving. Catherine was on regular highway now, and she could breathe however she wanted. She pulled over onto the shoulder and stopped, her whole body shaking. She got out of the cab and walked back to look at Highway 43. From this end, it looked normal. Just a dark 2-lane road disappearing into pine forest. She couldn't see any movement, couldn't see any sign of what she just experienced. She got back in her truck and continued to her delivery, an hour behind schedule but otherwise fine. The cargo had shifted but nothing was damaged. Catherine filed her report as a minor delay due to rough road conditions. She didn't mention the breathing. Who would believe her? She'd barely believed it herself. She checked news and road reports for Highway 43, looking for any indication that something was wrong with it. Nothing. The road was listed as open and in good condition, but she never drove it again. She took longer routes to avoid it, added extra time to her schedules. Other drivers asked her why, since Highway 43 was the fastest way. She made excuses, said she didn't like how narrow it was, how isolated. Most drivers shrugged and continued using it. Some came back with stories. One driver mentioned feeling like the road was off somehow, like it moved under him. Another said she'd felt like she couldn't breathe right while driving it, like something was controlling her lungs. Most drivers noticed nothing, drove through without incident. But a few felt it, felt the road breathing, felt their own breathing synchronize. Catherine researched the area, found old stories about Highway 43. The road had been built in the 1960s, paved over a section of swamp that developers had partially drained. Some of the old-timers remembered protests, people saying you couldn't trust land that was more water than earth. But the road was built anyway, tons of gravel and asphalt laid over unstable ground. There were stories of accidents on Highway 43, more than you'd expect for such a quiet road. Trucks that rolled for no apparent reason. Cars that went off the road despite perfect conditions. Drivers who couldn't explain what happened, who said the road moved or bucked or breathed. One old newspaper article from 1973 caught Catherine's attention. A truck driver had claimed Highway 43 was alive, said the road breathed and made him breathe with it. He'd been driving a load of livestock feed, soybeans actually, same as Catherine. He said the road wouldn't let him go until he gave it what it wanted. No one understood what he meant. They thought he was drunk or crazy. He never drove Highway 43 again, and he died 2 years later, still insisting the road was alive. Catherine wondered what the road wanted. Attention, company, something to breathe with, to share rhythm with. Or maybe it wanted nothing, maybe it just was, a living thing that happened to be a road, a piece of infrastructure that had somehow become organic, that breathed because that's what living things do. She drives other routes now, other roads. But sometimes at night, when she's alone on dark highways, she becomes aware of her own breathing. In and out, in and out. And she wonders if the roads she's on are listening, matching her rhythm, breathing with her. She wonders if Highway 43 is the only one, or if there are others, quiet living roads scattered across the country, waiting for drivers to synchronize with them, to share their breath, to drive in rhythm with something that shouldn't be alive but is. Catherine Rodriguez still drives for the agricultural company, still hauls soybeans and feed across the South, but she never takes shortcuts anymore. She sticks to major highways, well-traveled routes, roads that are definitely dead pavement and nothing more. Because she knows now that some roads are alive, that some stretches of highway have a heartbeat, have lungs, have a need to connect with the drivers who travel them. And once you've breathed with a living road, once you've felt that synchronization, you can never quite trust pavement again. Story 10. The Last Exit. Thomas Chen had been a trucker for 19 years, running coast-to-coast routes for transcontinental shipping. He was one of the veterans, one of the drivers other truckers looked up to, known for his calm demeanor and his ability to handle any situation. Ice storms, brake failures, difficult customers. Thomas had seen it all and dealt with it professionally. Nothing shook him. His current run was straightforward, a load of consumer electronics from Los Angeles to New York City, standard container on a standard route. He'd taken Interstate 40 east across the Southwest and was now driving through Oklahoma, planning to continue into Arkansas and Tennessee. The weather was perfect, the truck running smoothly. Thomas expected to reach New York in 3 days, right on schedule. It was around 2 a.m., somewhere in eastern Oklahoma on Interstate 40, when Thomas saw the exit. It wasn't marked on his GPS, wasn't shown on the road signs, but it was there, a perfectly normal-looking off-ramp curving away from the highway. What caught his attention was the sign, "Last exit all services." Thomas frowned. That was unusual wording. Most exits listed specific services, gas, food, lodging. All services was vague, and last exit was strange too, because his GPS showed several exits in the next 20 miles. But maybe the sign was just poorly worded. Maybe it meant the last exit for a while on the stretch. He wasn't planning to stop, but his fuel gauge showed he was getting low. He'd meant to fill up at the previous exit but had missed it while adjusting his radio. This exit would work fine. Thomas took the ramp, following the curve down and away from Interstate 40. The road at the bottom of the ramp was well maintained, 2 lanes leading into darkness. Thomas couldn't see any lights suggesting a town or gas station, but sometimes rural exits required a few miles of driving before reaching services. He continued forward, watching for signs. After a mile, he saw lights ahead, a gas station glowing bright in the darkness. Relief washed over Thomas. He pulled in, parked at the pumps, and got out. The station looked normal, maybe a bit dated in design, but clean and well lit. A bell chimed as he walked inside to prepay. The clerk behind the counter was an elderly man, thin and pale. He looked at Thomas with watery eyes and smiled. "Welcome, last stop before the end." Thomas pulled out his credit card. "Pump 3, please, fill it up." The clerk took the card and ran it through an old-fashioned slider machine, the kind that hadn't been used in years. "It'll take a minute to process," the clerk said. "Old equipment, but it works." Thomas nodded and looked around the store. The shelves were stocked with familiar brands, but everything looked slightly wrong. The logos were close but not quite right, colors slightly off, fonts not quite matching what he knew. He picked up a candy bar. The wrapper said Snickers, but the typeface was different and the bar looked bigger than it should be. "Is everything okay here?" Thomas asked, feeling uneasy. The clerk smiled that watery smile. "Everything's fine, just different. This is the last exit after all. Things change once you leave the main road." Thomas set down the candy bar. "What do you mean, last exit? There are plenty of exits ahead on I-40. The clerk shook his head slowly. "Not for you, this is the last one, the only one. You took it, so now this is where you are." Cold prickled down Thomas's spine. "I'm just getting gas, then I'm getting back on the highway." The clerk handed back the credit card. "You can try, pump's ready, fill up, then we'll see." Thomas walked back outside, unsettled. Something was wrong with this place, wrong with that clerk. He pumped his gas quickly, watching the numbers climb on the display. When the tank was full, he replaced the nozzle and climbed back into his cab. Time to get out of here. He started the engine and pulled onto the road, heading back toward the entrance ramp. But as he drove, he realized he couldn't find it. The road that had brought him to the gas station continued forward, but there was no intersection, no turn that would take him back to the ramp. He drove for 5 minutes, seeing nothing but empty road stretching ahead. Thomas turned around and drove back past the gas station, looking for the ramp on the other side. Nothing. The road just continued in that direction too, leading into darkness. The ramp had disappeared. Thomas pulled over and checked his GPS. Showed his position, but not on Interstate 40. According to the GPS, he was nowhere, just a blue dot in gray, empty space. He tried his phone, no signal. He tried the CB radio, static. Thomas got out and walked back toward where the ramp should have been. There was nothing there, just road continuing into darkness in both directions and the gas station glowing behind him. The clerk was standing outside now, watching him. "You're looking for the way back," he called out. "There isn't one. This is the last exit. Once you take it, you can't return to the highway. You can only go forward." "Forward to where?" Thomas demanded, walking toward the clerk. "What is this place?" The clerk gestured down the road. "Forward to the end, that's all there is now. The last exit takes you to the last road, and the last road takes you to the end. Everyone who comes here drives it. There's nothing else to do." Thomas felt fear like he'd never experienced, cold and heavy in his chest. "This is insane. I'm not staying here. I'm finding my way back." He climbed into his truck and started driving away from the gas station, down the road in the direction that seemed most likely to lead somewhere. He drove for an hour, maintaining a steady 60 miles per hour. The road was straight and well maintained, but nothing changed. No intersections, no buildings, no landmarks. Just empty road under a starless sky. His fuel gauge showed he'd burned through an eighth of a tank, but the landscape looked identical to when he'd started. Thomas tried to turn around again, but when he completed the turn and started back, the road looked exactly the same. He couldn't tell if he was going back or continuing forward. Every direction was identical, infinite road stretching into nothing. He passed the gas station again, or maybe a different gas station that looked identical. The clerk was outside, watching him drive past. Thomas didn't stop. He kept going, determined to find an exit, a crossroad, anything, but there was nothing. Just the road, the darkness, and occasionally the gas station appearing ahead, the clerk always watching. Thomas drove for hours. The sun never rose. His clock showed time passing, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., but the darkness never lifted. He should have crossed into Arkansas by now, should have been approaching Little Rock. Instead, he was trapped on an endless road that led nowhere. He stopped the truck and got out, screaming into the darkness. "Let me out, I don't belong here, I have a delivery to make." His voice echoed strangely, repeating but distorted, changing pitch and tone until it sounded like someone else screaming. A sound answered him, coming from far away. An engine. Thomas looked down the road and saw headlights approaching. Another truck, big rig like his, driving toward him. Relief flooded through Thomas. Another driver, someone who might know the way out. The truck pulled up alongside him and stopped. The driver climbed down, a woman in her 50s. She looked at Thomas with tired eyes. "You're new," she said. "Took the last exit." Thomas nodded eagerly. "Yes, do you know the way back? How do we get back to the interstate?" The woman shook her head. "You don't. I've been driving this road for I don't know how long, months, years. Time doesn't work right here. There's just the road and the gas station, that's all there is." Thomas couldn't accept that. "There has to be a way out, we just haven't found it yet," the woman sighed. "I thought that too. I drove for days, weeks, looking for an exit. There isn't one. The last exit is final. Once you take it, you're on the last road, driving toward the end. Some drivers accept it, stop fighting. Others keep driving, keep searching. Either way, we're all here forever." She climbed back into her truck. "I'm continuing on. Maybe I'll find the end eventually. Maybe there's something at the end. Or maybe the road just goes on forever. Either way, I have to keep driving. It's all there is." She pulled away, and Thomas watched her taillights disappear into the darkness. Thomas got back in his truck. He sat there trying to think rationally, trying to find a solution. But what solution could there be? He was trapped on an impossible road, driving through an empty nothing, with no way back and no destination ahead. The last exit had taken him out of the world into some space between, where roads existed but led nowhere. He thought about his delivery, the electronics sitting in his trailer. They'd never reach New York. The company would report him missing, would search for him, would never find him. His family would wonder what happened, would grieve, would never know he was still driving, still moving, trapped forever on a road that existed outside of normal space. Thomas started the engine. He'd drive forward because what else could he do? Sitting still felt worse than moving. At least if he was driving, he was doing something, even if it led nowhere. He joined the other lost drivers on the last road, vehicles passing him occasionally, some new and terrified, others old and resigned. Ghost trucks on a ghost road, driving forever toward an end that never came. Thomas Chen drives still, or the thing that used to be Thomas Chen. His truck was found abandoned at a rest stop on Interstate 40 in Oklahoma. Engine cold, cargo intact, no sign of the driver. The police investigated, found no evidence of foul play, concluded he'd simply walked away, though why he would abandon a valuable load made no sense. But late at night, drivers on Interstate 40 through Oklahoma sometimes report seeing an exit that isn't on their GPS, an off-ramp marked with a strange sign. Last exit all services. Most drivers pass it by, following their GPS, trusting their maps. But some take it, curious about the odd wording, needing gas or food. Those drivers are never seen again. Their trucks turn up abandoned, their loads intact, the drivers simply gone. And if you're driving late at night, if you see an exit marked last exit, don't take it. Don't be curious. Don't stop for gas or food, because the last exit is final. It takes you onto the last road, the endless road, the road that exists between reality and absence. And once you're on the last road, you drive forever, passing other lost drivers, occasionally glimpsing a gas station with a clerk who smiles and says, "Welcome to the last stop before the end." The last exit calls to tired drivers, to those who aren't paying attention, to those who think one more exit won't matter. It called to Thomas Chen, and he answered. Now he drives through darkness that never lifts, on a road that never ends, hauling a load that will never be delivered, trapped forever in the space between highways and nowhere, in the realm of the last exit.